Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to paint this night landscape and also a simple method for painting auroras. You can follow this with any brushes you want, but I'll list the ones I'm using in the description. And I'm going to start by painting the background wash first. So for that, I'm going to use the fuzzy round brush and a deep indigo tone, and I'm going to create a kind of spiraling wash pattern like this, and I'm varying the pressure quite a bit so I get this banding effect. Next, I want to soften some of these kind of overlapping strokes just a little bit, so I'm going to grab the water blender brush and just use it like this. Now the way I'm planning out the scene is about this area here is the horizon, and this is going to be the sky, so I want to darken the sky area. So for that, I'm going to grab the freehand selection tool. I'll just select the sky. I'll feather out that selection quite a bit, hue, saturation, and brightness, and I'm going to darken it and saturate it. After that, I'm going to make another selection, but this time just along the horizon, and I'm going to brighten it. And I think I'll also shift this area a little bit towards purple using the hue slider. And with our background wash finished, I can move on and paint the mountain. And that's going to be on its own layer above the background. For the color, I'm going to use pure white. And I want this mountain to have a kind of scratchy mixed media kind of texture. So I'm going to do it with a charcoal brush called 6B compressed. And I'm going to use this at the largest size. And I'm first going to do a bunch of small kind of short strokes going different directions. There we go. Then after that, I'm going to grab the eraser brush, which is set to the Forster fine liner. And I'm just going to kind of erase out a silhouette of the mountain. Then I'll make this brush a little bit larger and erase all the excess. And it's totally optional, but I want to draw some cute little trees on the mountain. So I'm going to do these on the same layer as the mountain. I want to use a scratchy pen brush, so I'm going to use the little pine. And I'll just draw them on like this. And once the mountain is finished, I'm going to use the arrow tool to scale it down and position it better in the scene. Next, I want to paint a ridgeline that just goes across the base of the mountain. So I'll do that on its own layer. For the brush, I'm going to go back to the Alpine brushes, and I'm going to use the pine tree line brush. For the color, I think I'll use a similar kind of indigo tone I did the background with, and I'll just paint it on like this. Now the bottom here of our ridgeline, it's a little bit soft, but I want to make it softer. So I'm going to grab the water blender brush, and at the largest size, I'm going to use it to kind of raise up the bottom here, and it kind of looks like mist. And this next step is optional, but I think this scene would look nice if I had some kind of pine trees kind of framing in on the edges. So to do that, I'll make another blank layer. For the brush, I'm going to use one of the pine tree brushes that come with the Alpine Forced kit, but of course you can always kind of manually draw pine trees if you want to. I think for this one, I'm going to use the rugged rocky pine. Pretty large size. Same dark indigo tone, and I'm just going to draw them on kind of slightly curving towards the mountain. And because this is a night scene with a dark sky, we don't see the pine trees super well, but I think they have a nice subtle effect. And finally, at this point, we can add all the snow and the stars. And basically, since these are all just white dots, I can do them all on one layer. So I'll make another blank layer above everything. I'll grab some pure white. For the brush, I'm going to use the Snowy Speckles brush, and I'm just going to go over the whole scene like this. And with the background landscape here pretty much finished, I'm going to merge all the layers for it together onto one, just to keep things organized here. Then I'll make a new layer above that, and this is where I'm going to finally paint the aurora. So for the aurora, the first thing I'm going to do is grab an opaque pen brush, in this case the Forster fine liner, and I'm going to use a kind of yellowy green tone, something not too saturated. The exact color doesn't matter because we can adjust it later on. And I'm just going to draw a very simple kind of squiggly in the sky like this. After that, I'm going to go along the squiggle and do a bunch of kind of vertical squiggles like this. And I want this whole thing to be a little bit blurry. So I'll go to my adjustments, Gaussian blur, and I'll just blur it a few %. There we go. And I want some areas of this to be blurrier than others. So I'm going to grab the water blender, and I'll soften a few areas like this. Next, I want to give this a very stretched out kind of vertical blending effect. So again, I'll go to my adjustments, but this time I'm going to go to motion blur. I'm going to tap in the center and drag. And you see, if I drag this around, it gives me a kind of a directional blur. And I'm going to blur it so these are kind of shooting up into the sky. There we go. And at this point, it's a good idea to kind of adjust and refine the colors. So the first thing I'm going to do is brighten this. Of course, in your case, you might need to make different adjustments. Next, I want to add a kind of color variation to my aurora, just so it's not all the same shade of green. So I'm going to use the freehand selection tool. I'm just going to select a few random areas of this. Circle back. I'll feather out this selection quite a bit. Then I can use the hue, saturation, and brightness again, and it's just going to mess with the area that we selected, and I'm going to shift the color. There we go. I think I'll do it one more time. And this aurora looks pretty good, but I want to give it a kind of forced perspective so it has a kind of a larger sense of scale. So for that, I'm going to grab the arrow tool. First, I'm going to set it to distort, and I'm going to pull out these kind of top nodes. Then I can switch to warp, and I'm going to bend it and wrap it around the mountain in the sky. And each time you do this, your aurora is going to be different. But in this case, it looks like my tree is going behind the aurora, which doesn't make sense. I think the best way to resolve this is to erase through the aurora to show the tree. So I'm going to do my best to do that. And I think that looks pretty good. And now to finish up the scene, the last element I'm going to add is a little tent down here in the foreground. And that's going to be on its own layer by itself. And I'm just going to sketch it out using a light orange tone. After that, I can use the arrow tool to position this a little bit better, and then I can use the distort tool to kind of skew it a little bit. And it's optional, but I think for tents, they look nice if they have a kind of glowing effect, and that's super easy to do. I'll make a blank layer above my tent. I'm going to use a very bright yellow tone. Same Forster fine liner brush. Pretty much any brush will work for this. And first, I'm going to draw a kind of blob here in the center of the tent, and this represents the center of the light source. Then I'll do a couple of lines out here, just showing the light kind of reflecting around the environment. After that, I'm going to go to my adjustments and apply a pretty strong Gaussian blur to this. And then to finish up this effect, I'm going to change the transparency mode of this to add. Then I can adjust the opacity and set it to a point where it looks natural. And now to finish up this illustration, I'm going to kind of crop it into a perfect circle. So for that, I'm going to make a blank layer above everything. I'm going to use pure white, and I like my circle to have a somewhat scratchy edge. So I'm going to do this with a charcoal brush. I think I'll use the 4B compressed. And first, I'm going to use this at a small size and just draw a circle like this. Then I'll hold the position until Procreate kind of snaps it. I'll position it a little bit better. You can also tap on this kind of ellipse thing up here and select circle, and this will let you kind of shape it more precisely. I think that looks pretty balanced. Then I'm just going to continue painting on with this charcoal brush and cover everything beyond the edge of the circle. And just like that, our landscape is finished. I think this type of illustration is really suitable as a greeting card or as a small art print. Here are 2 videos explaining how to make those with Procreate Art, and you're welcome to check them out next.